The second full week of the season really gets underway tonight. And one of the first signs of a new year in college basketball, of course, in non-conference action, is the Champions Classic. Champions, Blue Bloods, staples of the sport from a program level. Tonight in Atlanta, Georgia, we've got two great matchups to preview for you here. Joe Raineri and myself will look at this. Jon Rothstein joins the show up next to break it down even further. Let's start, Joe, with the first of two games tonight in the ATL. It is number one Kansas and Michigan State. Tom Izzo, of course, we know what he brings to this matchup. And, of course, Bill Self and the top-ranked Jayhawks, who did survive an incredible comeback attempt from North Carolina at home in the fog in a great top 10 tilt on Friday night. KU remains perfect at 2-0, 92-89. Michigan State has won both of its two games to start this year as well. Sparty booked as a 6.5-point underdog in Atlanta, total at 150 and a hook. How do you break down the matchup between the Jayhawks and the Spartans?
It feels, if we're being honest, it feels like kind of a low number for Kansas here, given the fact that I've talked to a number of guys that follow Michigan State basketball, and they are all on the consensus that this is one of the worst Michigan State teams that Tom Izzo has had in a very, very long time. They're unranked. They said none of the Michigan State starters right now would even sniff the floor for Kansas. Which has already faced number 9 North Carolina. In the meantime, you've got Michigan State, who's played who exactly? Nobody. They're only shooting about 25% from deep. We'll learn whether or not that's the true narrative here from Michigan State, but all indicators are this is not, Tom Izzo aside, this is not a good Michigan State team. And given what we've already seen from Kansas, it would be hard not to want to lay that number here tonight.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Joe. There's no doubt that KU is more battle-tested. Michigan State, though, has looked good in its opening two games of this year. Against Monmouth and Niagara, I understand, but the Spartans have been booked as at least a 20-point favorite in both. They've covered the number both times. They've scored at least 81 points. They had 96 against Niagara late last week, I believe, on Thursday night. KU has scored at least 87 in both of its two games, the fifth most efficient offense in the country. That is Kansas. 150.5 also feels just a little bit light. So that is the first game of two tonight in Atlanta. It should be a great one. So, too, should be the nightcap. Number 6 Duke, number 19 Kentucky. Also a 6.5-point spread, but the total up by 10 points, 160.5. The Blue Devils, a 6.5-point favorite against Mark Pope's Wildcats in his first true test as the head man in Lexington. Of course, the game is played in Atlanta. The talented freshman for Duke against a reassembled roster for Kentucky. How do you see it tonight in the A?
Yeah, I see some points in this one here, Ben. I think a lot of star power here. You got to love Pope, who's never met a three that he doesn't like his kids to take here. And I do think, obviously, Duke has shown an ability to be able to go toe-to-toe with anybody. Duke has got not one but two unbelievable freshmen on this team that we're going to be talking about a lot, I think, throughout the season here. So while it might be a new look Kentucky team, I think points are coming. I think the total is 160 and a half, Ben. Yeah. I think both these teams can outshoot one another. I think this is going to be a fun one. Would not shock me if this thing lands closer to 170 than it does 160.
Duke has looked the part of that national championship favorite despite being ranked 7th in the AP top 25 in the preseason, as you saw, up by a spot. They have scored at least 96 in both of their games. They have covered the number as at least a 30-point favorite in both of their games. They have gone over because of it in both of their games. It's not just Cooper Flagg. It's Con Knippel, who is a great shooter as well, and a lot of other talent for this Duke team that fill out the roster, and some veterans like Tyrese Proctor, Mason Gillis, that add that experience to the young Duke superstar core. I'm big on Kentucky, mainly because I would get in heated arguments with Mark Zeno and Donnie Rightside trying to tell me that Kentucky was not a top 5 or top 10 job in college basketball. Idiots, the both of them. Of course, Kentucky is. And Mark Pope has brought his style of play from BYU. Again, not a three they don't like, and they will shoot it up. And it has carried over so far for the Cats, 100 plus in both games, albeit against Wright State and Bucknell, I understand. But over in both, their only non-cover for the Cats, winning by 28 against Bucknell, missing out on the cover by a hook. But over in both, Joe, I agree with you. I think there's some points to come tonight in Atlanta, perhaps in both games, but certainly in the nightcap. A big statement for both. It's always a big statement for everybody in the Champions Classic. It's one of the great things about non-conference play in college basketball. These games do not hurt your resume. They only provide that positive, that benefit of having a quad one win when the season is through at the end of the year. Come Selection Sunday, should be a great night in the Champions Classic in Atlanta. Other notable Tuesday games outside of Atlanta. Baylor got beat big in its opening game of the year against Gonzaga 8 days ago. Back at home, only a 15.5-point favorite against Sam Houston State in Waco. Ole Miss, 17.5-point favorite against South Alabama. Villanova, in a Big Five battle, is just a 2.5-point favorite against St. Joe's. That should show you how bad things are for Kyle Neptune and the Cats. Temple, in another Big Five matchup, takes on Drexel. UCF, who pulled off the stunner on opening night against Texas A&M, 5.5-point favorite against the former Dusty May-led team of FAU. Oh, God, that bottom game gives me chills just reading it. My Syracuse Orange, 11.5-point favorite against the toothpaste college, that being Colgate. Joe, Colgate is a great team. The Red Raiders shoot the crap out of the basketball. They are always a tournament contender because of that out of the Patriot League. Here's why that game scares the crap, the living daylights out of me. It had been a very long time, up until 3 seasons ago now, that Syracuse had been beaten by its upstate rival in central New York, Colgate. In fact, it had been since 1961-62 that Colgate had gotten the better of Syracuse. And then they beat the Orange in 2021-22. They beat the Orange again in 2022-23. And last year, just a 4-point game for SU to survive. Listen, man, I hate it. I'm probably not even going to watch it. I don't want to see it. Syracuse, 11.5-point favorite against Colgate.
I don't know about that. Those two teams, Ben, Colgate is not going to be overly impressed or intimidated by any stretch of the imagination taking on Q's here. It is kind of their big game of the year. They always like to make a statement. I wouldn't be laying 11.5 with Syracuse. I also wouldn't be laying 15.5 with Baylor. I like Sam Houston State to take down the Conference USA title this year. This is an undervalued team with a ton of experience here. That is a big number, 15.5, to be laying with a team that can absolutely shoot. Wouldn't shock me if Sam Houston State keeps that thing closer.
And I will just say this, Colgate did lose to Drexel by 17 points on Saturday, so maybe not the Colgate team that we have known in the Patriot League. Still a very, very scary game. Joe Raineri, we thank you for your time on this Tuesday on the early line. We'll spin it with Jon Rothstein on the other side for some more college basketball previews, and then I'll give the people the look at the college football playoff rankings revealed and sandwiched in between the Champions Classic. Raineri, I'll talk to you Friday. Of course, the guy will be back on the SportsGrid Network all across the place all week long.
Yeah. In about 20 minutes, man. In about 20 minutes.
It was wild. Jon Rothstein up next. This might only be November, but on this second Tuesday of the month, it's a huge night in college basketball. One of the early signs that college hoops is back. The Champions Classic and a matchup of 4 blue bloods tonight in Atlanta, Georgia. So to set the stage for that, the rest of the slate on this Tuesday into the second full week of this 2024-25 campaign, who better to join us than Jon Rothstein of CBS Sports, joining us here on the early line on behalf of the FanDuel Sportsbook. Jon, always a pleasure, my man. How excited are you for tonight's 2 games of the Champions Classic in Atlanta?
Really excited because three of the four teams in this event, Michigan State, Kentucky, and Duke, have yet to play games this season against power conference opponents. And, Ben, everybody loves to jump to conclusions over statistics that are accumulated in by-game settings. I am one who feels like every couple of days you need to offer a PSA that you need to take all stats accumulated in bye games with a grain of salt unless they're exceptionally staggering. So we'll find out a lot more about the Spartans, the Blue Devils, and the Wildcats after tonight.
And, John, I think that's a great point because not only do we break down the game, how close it's going to be, the key players that will impact the matchups that will dictate the outcome, but what we're going to learn from these teams on display tonight in Atlanta. It's Bill Self and Tom Izzo. It's number one Kansas and Michigan State. KU, the only team, John, that you mentioned of the four in the Champions Classic that has played power conference competition. What a game it was, the top 10 tilt on Friday night in Lawrence as KU held off the second half charge from North Carolina to win 92-89 in a high-scoring affair. So perhaps earlier on, the Jayhawks battle tested and the number one team in the land, a 6.5-point favorite against Sparty tonight. Just how competitive, John, do you expect the opener in Atlanta to look?
I consider Kansas to be a heavy favorite in this game simply because I am not sure if Michigan State will be able to match up inside with Hunter Dickinson. I talked to Tom Izzo about this yesterday. There's still a lot of question marks with this Michigan State team. Jaden Akins is obviously somebody you can look to as a go-to guy. But after that, there's a lot of questions with Michigan State. Izzo knows that the jumps of sophomores Jeremy Fears, Cone Carr, and Xavier Booker is exceptionally important for this Michigan State team. He also knows that Michigan State at some point is going to have to identify a secondary scorer behind Jaden Akins. Will it be Jackson Kohler? Will it be somebody like Xavier Booker? Will it be Frankie Fiddler, the transfer from Omaha? There's still a lot of questions for the team from East Lansing, but I do want to point out Tom Izzo believes that Jeremy Fears, the point guard who redshirted last season, can eventually have a 4-year impact like a Mateen Cleaves, a Kalen Lucas, a Cassius Winston. And here is a staggering thing that stood out from Michigan State's first two games. During that span, Ben, Fears' assist-to-turnover ratio is 16-3. That's something I can read into.
Yeah, absolutely so. And he is going to be the orchestrator of the offense in East Lansing. John, to your point, hasn't been great competition yet for MSU, just Monmouth and Niagara, but booked as a 20-point favorite at least in both. The Spartans have covered both of those numbers. Now let's get on to the marquee matchup in the nightcap in the A. It's Duke and Kentucky. A first time to really introduce himself to the nation as the Cats head coach. That is Mark Pope. Yeah. And, of course, for Jon Scheyer and the Blue Devils, it is the full debut of this incredibly talented young freshman class. John, let's start with Duke. What do you think the Blue Devils will show tonight in Atlanta, booked as a 6.5-point favorite against the Wildcats?
Positional size and the ability, obviously, to take away maybe some of that free-flowing offense that Mark Pope said he's going to unveil this season. Look, I spent some time in the Triangle during the preseason, and the biggest thing that really had Jon Scheyer excited about this Duke team, in addition to his talented freshman class, was the positional size that Duke had. Duke has everybody on its roster, Ben, standing 6'4" or taller. This has a chance unequivocally to be the best defensive team that Jon Scheyer has had in 3 years at Duke, and that's better than the team 2 years ago that had Derek Lively in the pivot. I think another thing you need to look at, too, is Duke went out and added experience in the transfer portal with, obviously, Sion James, Malik Brown, and also Mason Gillis, who had a big role in that Purdue team last year that went to the national championship game. Those three players will be paramount tonight in defending a Kentucky team, again, that is really shooting the ball at a high level through 2 games against opponents, though, who were played in bye games.
Yeah, Duke has looked the part. They've been booked as at least a 30-point favorite in their first 2 games against Maine and Army, easily covering the numbers. Quickly on the Cats, John, you mentioned the offense for Mark Pope. Kentucky has scored at least 100 in its first 2 games of the year. What will the nation know about Big Blue Nation following tonight's game in Atlanta?
It's going to be a completely different style of basketball for people that follow Kentucky versus what we saw under John Calipari and even prior to that. Mark Pope is an innovative offensive coach who doesn't want the ball to stick. He wants the ball to move. He wants, obviously, things to be free-flowing offensively. It's going to be fascinating to see just how unselfish Kentucky can be and how players who were recruited out of the transfer portal who played at a lower level now step up a weight class. Lamont Butler was a terrific player at San Diego State. He is now going from the Mountain West to the Champions Classic. Kobe Brea was arguably the best shooter in college basketball last year at Dayton. 100 made threes, 49.8% from three-point range. He is going from the Atlantic 10 to the Champions Classic. Amari Williams from Drexel was going from the CAA to the Champions Classic. Ben, I quote Tim Robbins in The Shawshank Redemption: get busy living or get busy dying.
Andy Dufresne, don't tell no lies. As you'll see, John, as you look at the national championship odds, Duke remains the favorite at a short price at plus 950, but plenty of the teams tonight in Atlanta will be on display. Quickly, John, 30 seconds left. The other games on this Tuesday, which one catches your eye?
Villanova St. Joe's, 5 o'clock Eastern, a standalone game on a Tuesday afternoon. This was circled when the schedule came out because it was a Big Five rivalry game. It is now in bold print because these two bitter rivals will try and avoid a second loss in the first 9 days of the season. Ben, I've said it before. I'll say it again. This is only November.
Yes, it certainly is. And that is Jon Rothstein. We appreciate the time. More of the early line next.